Welcome back. You're watching TVC Breakfast. Our next discussion is about African countries, African government attending the Africa Energy Week. This program began on Tuesday, October the 17th, and the Renewing Development Initiative and a host of other civil society organizations in Africa have now asked the Africa Union to reject overtures and monies from foreign entities to expand existing oil and gas projects, as well as establish new ones in Africa. Their position, contained in a letter addressed to the chair of the AU, drew the attention of the body to the new scramble for pollution fields across Africa. And they say what is truly needed is an energy transition that is people-centered while promoting energy systems which allow for all Africans to become producers of energy rather than just consumers. And we have joining us now, this time via Zoom, from Port Harcourt, Rivers State, the coordinator, Oil Watch International, Ken Tebe Ebiarido. Thank you very much for speaking to us on this. All right, we'll try to bring in where, connecting with Ken Tebe Ebiarido, our guest this session now, and he will come up, shortly. Ibrahim, this is an ongoing discussion. It's also one that, never ends. The issue of pollution, oil pollution, the extent of involvement of oil majors. We even here in Nigeria, we can relate.
That's right.
The Niger Delta, the cleanup process, the enormous extent of, the pollution to the waters, which threatens livelihoods. It also threatens livestock, basically. This is a discussion that many activists, continue to talk about, and how Africa is ready, and African leaders should truly be ready for clean oil, renewable energy for the good of all.
Well, and the fact that they've been, the oil and gas of a thing is something that has been something much of a curse to the nation, which is supposed to be a blessing. We use it to our benefit, and at the other side, we also feel, the downside to it, also contributing to people who are already, poverty-ridden, destroying their environment, degrading their environment, and also spoiling their flora and fauna. So it's an ongoing discussion, conversation, where even though the international communities will talk about climate change, we should reduce carbon emission, we should, what's it called? We should also tap in the area of natural resources where we can move away from the oil and gas of a thing. I think our guest is back.
Ken Tebe Ebiarido, coordinator, Oil Watch International, joining us from Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Thank you very much for joining in. And, Ibrahim and I have already, bantered a bit about the angle that these activists are coming from. And from your perspective as an activist, tell us what you make of this position as to the involvement of oil majors in the pollution, and now that intense discussions are ongoing in Cape Town, Africa. What are your expectations?
Thank you very much for having me. If you look at the statement that has been released, it's a clear indication of the fact that the government of Africa and also the multinational companies are lying in the same bed and are not even taking into consideration the impact, the activities, and the extraction of which they do have on the community. Concerned about this is the fact that communities bear the brunt of every extraction that is going on. And if you look at the African continent, let us even come back to the Niger Delta. For the past 60 years, there's been massive extraction going on, and there's little or no to show for it. And for the situation that is going on in Africa, we are thinking of how to continue more extraction rather than think of an alternative to energy, which will now be in this way that is going to be less destructive to the environment and more beneficial to people. So we, in entirety, we condemn what is happening in South Africa. We believe it should be a people-centered conference.
Well, the Nairobi Declaration called for more clean energy, but, they failed to emphatically call out the global fossil fuel merchants and remained silent on the need for rapid global phase out of coal, oil, and fossil gas, etc.
Yes.
Did you wonder why?
Yes. Well, it's I was not too shocked because first and foremost, when you look at the people who actually funded the conference, you talked about the polluters, you talked about the government people, and where our governments, African governments, are now being too dependent on the multinational companies to be directing and also trying to give a leadway into how decisions will be made as regards their energy. It's not a huge surprise. In the last conference of parties in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, we were not surprised. We had over 660 lobbyists in the conference of parties that happened in Egypt. So in a situation where 660 lobbyists for the oil companies are in existence in a conference of parties where ordinarily supposed to discuss issues that will give Africa energy sovereignty, that will talk about the reduction of climate change, that will talk about more issues around reduction of carbon emissions. We have the oil companies and governments dominating that space with little or no input coming in from communities. It's very clear that the governments and the multinational companies are still interested in profits over these people.
And you also say, well, these groups also say that Africa is even in a better place to negotiate a more Afrocentric approach to oil and gas exploration, really, because after all, they have the potential, they have these resources in abundance, and so this gives us a better place, to negotiate, fairly, at least for the interest of its peoples. Talk to us about this stance and how you think that our leaders, African leaders, can push this narrative as against, what you are seeing.
Okay. From the first place, if you look at the African continent is very rich in natural resources. And if you look at what is happening around the world, it's very obvious that they are still interested. The Western world is still interested in taking out everything that is of natural resources from Africa to their own places. And it's very clear that if we continue in the plight at which we are doing, we will not have a clear definition of energy sovereignty defined and designed by the Africans in a manner where it is going to be beneficial to Africans. And if we continue on the plight of the fact that the multinationals need to lead these discussions, the multinationals need to understand, need to keep discussing with our state governments and our federal governments, and it will create a situation where we will not have a clear-cut understanding of energy transition in an African way. We have the natural resources. If you look at what is happening in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, it's very evident that the next place to come and look for oil or to come and look for gas is in Africa. We still have gas pipelines running all the way from the Niger Delta down up to Morocco axis, which the eventual place will be to Europe. We have the Chinese coming in from the Horn of Africa and doing a lot of developmental work in different parts of the African continent. All of this is in the plea to ensure that they keep plundering the resources from Africa. And where we expected the governments of the African governments to look at it in a situation where they take it as an opportunity to use it to determine their own energy sovereignty for themselves, by themselves. But they fail to do that because they're interested in what they can get out of the business profits that will come, rather than defining their own energy sovereignty for themselves. And I think it's high time we Africans start defining our own energy transition in our own way that is beneficial to us. We have the natural resources in Africa, and we can do better if we only put our thinking caps together and try to define our own way, our own transition that was going to be beneficial for us in our own type of environment.
Well, it's now left to be seen whether African leaders have the willpower to, get on this. But then how sound do you consider the assertion that that gas is a transition fuel.
Sorry, can you take that again?
I was trying to find out what you think about the assertion, how sound you consider it to say that gas is a transition fuel.
Well, gas, like it's been rumored, having that as a dirty and having that dirty energy means that extraction is still is still going on in different parts of Africa. We are saying that we should leave the oil in the soil, we should leave the coal in the hole, and we should leave the gas in the soil. We don't want a situation where extraction will continue. Using gas as an alternative to energy is not the best for the environment because we're still talking about continuous repollution and continuous extraction. And the only thing that can reduce the 1.5 extraction, 1.5 that is going on in Africa is to ensure that no further extraction is continued on the African continent. If you look at what is happening, a certain percentage that will increase in our global temperature will mean that places like Lagos will go under the sea, places like Port Harcourt will go under the sea, places like Durban in South Africa will go under the sea, and a lot of all those things that will continue to go on. And if we are not careful, the situations that already bedeviling the African continent, situations like the sea level rise, will continue to increase. As we speak, communities around the coastal areas are already shrinking into the sea, and it's something that needs to be stopped immediately.
Right, and talking about a bid for increased funding for renewable energy investment in Africa, as that from analysts, from the perspective of analysts as yourself, activists as yourself, that's the way out. But, you know, how do we break this down? Is it something that government alone can do?
Well, it's not left for the government to do. It's an all stakeholders activities to be engaged in. The private sector needs to come in. The civil society groups needs to also share their own opinion and share their own ideas with government. But the most important thing is for government to have the political will to do what is right for the environment. It's for government to decide to listen to what is possible to ensure that one, our energy is locally transmitted among us, and also, most importantly, that the environment is being protected in all of this. If we don't have a government that will listen to us, that will listen to the needs of its people, then we are just going around, running around the wild goose chase and without having anything in action. A government that we need in Africa, not just Nigeria, is a government that will be thinking of a people's-oriented energy transition, a people's-oriented manner in which the people will benefit. And once the people benefit, it's very natural that the environment and the economy is going to improve naturally.
But are there any successful examples of countries that have effectively, regulated and managed their oil and gas industry in a sustainable and responsible manner?
Well, when you talk about an example, there can be little or no examples that can be cited anywhere in the world. The whole idea and philosophy of these multinational companies remain one thing: keep plundering and keep getting money from the extraction. But what is most important is that the activities which they carry on, the impact it has on the earth is most important. So to say that there's a clear example where extraction has been done successfully in a manner where, no, as long as extraction is involved, it means that the earth is being harmed. And once you harm the earth, it means that climate change is on the increase. It also means that the people in those communities will suffer the impact of climate change. So there is clearly no places where extraction has not been harmful to the environment. But there are places where beneficial, there's nothing like what they call a sustainable extraction. But there's a place, we can cite examples of where at least the oil companies have been able to respect the citizens and also try not to pollute and also endanger the environment where they are doing the activities. Those can be found in the Western world. Those can be found in some parts of America, but never in Africa, because they don't respect the people of Africa and they don't respect our environment.
And in calling for SENA negotiation bid, so to speak, during the ongoing conference, there was a session chaired by former Nigerian leader Olusegun Obasanjo, where Ibe Kachukwu was also a participant at that panel, as well as several leaders across the continent. And the takeaways from what they said was their call for negotiations, their call for investments, their call for industrialization, more industrialization of the oil and gas sector, where many of them were of the opinion that there should be mutually beneficial partnerships in this drive for cleaner extraction, so to speak, in this industry. But do you foresee that, a mutually beneficial partnership with the oil majors, for example, or what do we do with them, basically?
Well, in as much as Nigeria is still dependent on oil for its revenue, it also means that they will always have a situation where they will want to negotiate with the multinational companies. And it's a pity that we are trying to rely on the multinationals to dictate our economy, to dictate our source of energy, to dictate how we intend to improve our GDP. It's quite unfortunate, because I do not see how we, as a country, we cannot shift away from fossil fuels and rely on agriculture or other sources that can improve our economic base. Because what Obasanjo and the rest have been able to say in the past is that while we think of the economy in a way that the economy can grow, we must continue to invest in fossil fuel extraction. And I don't think that is the way forward. Nigeria needs to start thinking fast of how to remove its mindset from continuous dependence on fossil fuel. And if you look at it, we cannot say anything that has been gotten from this love story between the multinationals and the federal government of Nigeria. In the past 60 years, all we've seen in the Niger Delta is tears, sorrow, and blood. And what I want, and what the civil society organizations around Africa and also in Nigeria are saying, let us reduce the carbon footprints in Africa. Let us reduce the carbon footprints in Nigeria. Because if we do not do that, there will be no edge for our children to stay tomorrow. The impact of climate change is on the increase. And the faster we try to reduce its impact, the better for each and every one of us.
And I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, during the electioneering, days leading to the election, where he was speaking to some experts, he said that the international communities cannot dictate to Nigeria how they can, get on, how to manage their oil and gas, because they are going to do it on their own terms, if my memory didn't fail me. But my concern largely is based on the fact that, advocating that we should have electric cars on our roads so as to reduce carbon emission and all of that. But there had been a counter-argument that the manner and the ways the batteries for electric cars are produced is even more dangerous than the oil and gas we're running from. How sound is this argument?
Well, the argument around the batteries is quite valid, and but I really think that in trying to identify a way forward, we need to look at it holistically. What is the government's position in trying to reduce carbon emissions? What is the government's position in trying to ensure that the environment is also being protected in a manner that is also going to be beneficial to the economy? When we say that gas should be the way forward, it also means that you are going to improve extraction in a manner where, rather than continue depending on oil, but that will now depend on gas, but it does not take away the fact that the oil extraction will not continue and the oil sales will not continue. But, okay, taking the market of PMS away from a few people and let us see how gas can. I don't think it's valid enough. I don't think it's valid enough. I don't think it's something that Nigerian government or the Nigerian economy is also prepared for. We must fix what's the things that are already in existence. We must fix what is already wrong and try to make it right in a manner where it will be beneficial to everybody. I keep maintaining beneficial to everybody because it has to be a people-oriented and people-centered transition before we can get it right.
Right. So in other words, what measures then and policies would you then advocate for African leaders or African government to put in place to encourage renewable energy adoption as an alternative, to further oil and gas expansion?
Yeah, apart from the fact that advocating for renewable energy expansion, we also have to create a situation where there is a just transition from fossil fuel to other renewable manner. When we use the word just, it has to be democratic, it has to be people-driven, and it has to be transparent. And most importantly, the African continent to energy. And that call talks about leaving the oil in the soil, no more further extraction on oil no more further oil extraction, leaving the coal in the hole, and leaving the gas and also the tar in the sands. All these natural resources that we have been using, which is also a major contribution to climate change, we should start forward. The moment the African government start thinking outside the box, it's better for all of us, and that is how the African continent can be saved, by having little or no extraction on the African continent.
Right, and briefly, how high are your expectations that this ongoing conference will yield positive results, especially from the angle that activists as yourself are bringing? On the other hand, it has been observed that these oil majors are even among the major companies bankrolling the event.
Yes, that is the disappointing part of this particular conference. And this trend has been going on for quite some time now. Apart from the conference going on in South Africa, where they are bankrolling, they've also been able to seize the space in all negotiations around the Conference of Parties. In Sharm el-Sheikh, they took the conference to what I would call a Disneyland. Where people didn't have the capacity to be able to demonstrate. Civil society, indigenous people, community people didn't have the capacity to demonstrate the way they feel about the way negotiations were going on. And again, we are going to Dubai. And in Dubai, we are going to have almost the same type of environment. And most importantly, the heads or the presidents of all the COPs are coming from the oil company. So in as much as the oil companies are beginning to strengthen their strategies to ensure that they seize all the spaces, we, the civil society groups, we will not relent in ensuring that we enter those spaces and keep mounting pressure that the issues around climate change must be addressed holistically, and climate reparation must be given back to communities in a way to address the situations they've been passing through. Unfortunately, we do not see anything coming out from this coming COP. We also do not see anything going to happen in Durban because they have seized the space, but we will not relent in trying to also get into that space and also challenging them and to a standstill.
All right. Let's leave our conversations, on, this optimistic note that you will not, relent in your advocacy on this very important issue. Coordinator Oil Watch International, Kentebe Ebearedo, we thank you very much for your contributions on the program this morning.